Okay, well, welcome to the third part of Judges. It's okay. It'll be Judges chapters 12 through 16. Now, I have put this map up here just to give you an idea of when the Israelites settled the land. This is where all the tribes settled. This is what then was called Canaan. Maybe for some of you it's going to be hard to see, but just to show you, Dan eventually was moved to the north when they had the issue with Jeroboam, that he got charge of the 10 tribes when they divided the kingdom, and then he went all the way up here and he put an altar up here, and then he put another altar down here. Because here it says Dan. Originally, this is the Dan that started out, but then they spread to the most north spot of Israel and the most south. Why? To avoid the people going to Jerusalem. So he had two golden calves established, one in the north and one in the south. Okay. But here, later you can look at the map. What it shows is the tribes. And it gives you the name of all the previous judges. Like here we have Barak and Deborah in the area of Zebulun. Then we have in the area of Gilead and Manasseh, Jephthah. We've done Jephthah, Barak, Deborah.
On the
Zebulun, Gideon. We did Gideon. And here is Dan, and this is from the area that Samson was born. Okay, so what we're going to be discussing today is going to be in this area of the land. And by this time, remember that after these judges, every time the judges died, there was a period where the Israelites went back to doing evil in the sight of the Lord, and they were punished through foreign nations. Okay, so let's go to chapter 12 of Judges. And in chapter 12, what's going on initially is there's a debate, or let's say a family feud between Ephraim and Jephthah. Remember, Jephthah was the guy last time that he won all the battles, but his daughter had to be given to the temple service because he made a promise to the Lord, and it turned out that that's what happened. So between the men of Ephraim and Jephthah, what was going on is they were complaining that when he went to war against the sons of Ammon, that they weren't called. And he's saying, no, we called you, but you didn't show up. So they're in this region here where it says Manasseh. Here's Jephthah, which belonged really to Gilead. Okay, and so remember that the area of Manasseh, here's Ephraim. This is the area that belonged to the sons of Joseph. So it's a pretty big area. Okay, and so Jephthah is within the area, the land that belonged to Manasseh and Ephraim, Gilead. So they're having an issue because this blue line here is the Jordan River. And even though they had promised to each other, all the tribes, that the people on the east side of Jordan and the people on the west side of Jordan, that the Jordan, even though it was dividing them geographically, it wasn't supposed to divide them as families. Okay, socially and as families, it was not supposed to divide them. But the issue between Ephraim and Jephthah is that it is dividing them. The people from Ephraim have issues with the people from this side across the Jordan. And so the people from Gilead, every time people from Ephraim crossed over the Jordan, they would test to see if they were really Ephraimites or Gileadites, I guess you say. Gilligans, I don't know, whatever. They could not say, the word that they use here is, if you go to verse 6 of chapter 12, it says, well, let's go to verse 5 for context. It says, the Gileadites captured the forts of the Jordan opposite Ephraim. So basically, opposite Ephraim is east of the Jordan. Here's Ephraim. And they say, And it happened when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead would say to him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" And if he said no, then they would say to him, "Say now Shibolet." But he said Sibolet. Remember the shin and the sin? So they couldn't pronounce the shin. They only could pronounce the sin, the S sound of the shin. So they would say, "Okay, now pronounce Shibolet." And they would go Sibolet. They couldn't say. And that happened. The reason why is regionalism. Even though they're so close, really the Jordan divided them to a point that the people on this side spoke differently from the people on the west side. So that's the way they would find out from which side they were. And it says, "Now say now Shibolet," but he said Sibolet, for he could not pronounce it correctly. Then they seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. Thus there fell at that time 42,000 of Ephraim. So there was this issue between them because the Jordan geographically and socially really started dividing the people. Okay? And it says in verse 7 that Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. And then it mentions in verse 8, "Now Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel after him. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters whom he gave in marriage outside the family. And he brought in 30 daughters from outside for his sons, and he judged Israel 7 years." So the only thing we know about this guy, Ibzan, is just this information, but he was a judge. And to acquire political success, he married his daughters outside the clan with daughters from other clans. Remember that the issue of marriages were arranged politically more than anything else. It wasn't like they loved each other. It was, okay, my daughter's going to marry your son, and your son is going to marry this daughter because we need to have this political agreement. So he judged Israel for only 7 years, and he was buried in Bethlehem. Then in verse 11, it talks about a guy named Elon the Zebulonite, who judged Israel for 10 years. And then they don't give any more other information. Then another guy comes in called Abdon, the son of Hillel the Pirathonite, judged Israel after him. Who the heck was he? I don't know. It says he had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode in 70 donkeys. Remember that the thing about having so many donkeys meant that he was wealthy. So by putting his sons and grandsons on donkeys and they just donkeying around, it showed that they were very socially high class, and also they had a lot of wealth. So this guy ruled Israel for 8 years, and then it says that he died in the land of Ephraim and the hill country of the Amalekites. Now chapter 13 says, "Now the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of Yahweh, so that Yahweh gave them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. 40 years. Remember that the number 40, some people relate it with tribulation or testing. It also has to do with the natural man, with the things of the natural man, human. The flesh, let's put it that way, the flesh. And it says in verse 2 of chapter 13, "There was a certain man of Zotah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoach, and his wife was barren and had borne no children." It's interesting to see that usually prominent men that are born later are usually born from barren women that have been barren all their lives. So therefore, by all of a sudden having a child, we know that this child is a direct blessing from the Lord, was a direct purpose. So it says that she had borne no children. Verse 3, "Then the messenger of Yahweh appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to Elohim from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Because remember that the Philistines were used to chastise the people of Israel for doing evil again in the sight of the Lord. And so the Lord chose this woman who was barren, and it gives her instructions that from the womb, this child was already separated by the Lord to serve on his behalf and fight against, at least start fighting against the Philistines, because we know the Philistines lasted for a long time, even to the point when David was, remember when David was fighting Goliath? Goliath was a Philistine. And remember that during this time there were 5 kings of the Philistines, 5 kings. And the Nazarite, and we know that the Nazarite vow in the Hebrew is Nazri. He was a Nazri from the womb, even from the womb when he was conceived. The Nazarite vow is that the person is dedicated to the Lord, but Samson is being dedicated to the Lord from the womb. He couldn't cut his hair. He couldn't drink or eat anything that was from the vine, from the grape, nor eat anything unclean. So these are the instructions that the messenger gives her. And in verse 6 of chapter 13, it says, Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, a man of God. Remember that these messengers appear to people looking like men. Because if not, I think it would have scared her. Okay, so they have to come in an appearance that is acceptable to humans. As a man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the messenger of God, very awesome. Now the word there, awesome, in Hebrew is Norah. Norah. So Norah or Nora means awesome or wonderful. So he was very awesome in appearance. And I did not ask him where he came from, nor did he tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and now you shall not drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. So her son had no choice in this. This was already proclaimed and purposed from the Lord. And it says in verse 8, Then Manoah entreated the Lord, Yahweh, and said, so he prays to the Lord, O Adonai, please let the man of Elohim whom you have sent come to us again, that he may teach us what to do for the boy who is to be born. Elohim listened to the voice of Manoah, and the messenger of God came again to the woman as she was sitting in the field, but Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So he prays to the Lord saying, can you please send again this guy to just make sure what we are supposed to do with the child? Because again, they see that it's an individual. They see him as a man. Verse 10, So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, Behold, the man who came the other day has appeared to me. Then Manoah arose and followed his wife, and when he came to the man, he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to the woman? Well, really, they translate as woman, but it's to my wife. And he said, I am. Who also says, I am? Yahweh. Verse 12, Manoah said, Now when your words come to pass, what shall be the boy's mode of life? In other words, what's going to be his occupation? What is he supposed to do? And his vocation. So the messenger of the Lord said to Manoah, Let the woman pay attention to all that I said. She should not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. Let her observe all that I commanded. Then Manoah said to the messenger of the Lord, Please let us detain you so that we may prepare a young goat for you. The reason is, remember that this culture, the big thing is hospitality. They still don't know that he's an angel, that he's a messenger, and that he's not human, but to them they think he's a regular man, just like a prophet. Let's say they think he's a prophet. And so they want to entreat him by preparing a meal. That's hospitality. The same thing did Abraham, the same thing did Lot. And it says, let us prepare a young goat for you. The messenger of the Lord said to Manoah, though you detain me, I will not eat your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to Yahweh. For Manoah did not know that he was the messenger of Yahweh. So he's telling him why? Because he can't eat. Angels don't eat. Or at least this one, well, they do eat. Because the ones that went to visit Abraham ate. But it's like I'm watching this thing on Netflix, and it has to do with androids. This is a little blurb, and so to pass as humans, because they look exactly like humans, they have to eat. And so what they do is they have like this little bag in their throat. And every time they eat that bag, everything falls into that bag. Everything falls into the bag. So by the end of the day, when they go to bed, they just pull out the bag and throw it away. Because they can't eat, really. They can't eat. So I'm assuming, I'm not saying the angel has a bag inside of him, but it's interesting how they try to make believe they eat, but they don't really eat. And it says, so verse 17, so Manoah said to the messenger of Yahweh, what is your name? So that when your words come to pass, we may honor you. Why do they ask the name? Because remember, the name has to do with the purpose of the messenger, of the individual. Names in Hebrew are important. When you give a name to a child, you're basically already telling the destiny of that child. Yeshua. Why? Because he will Yeshua his people. Okay. Noah. Why Noah? Because Noah will comfort that generation. So every name has a purpose, has a meaning. It's like a destiny. So they're asking the angel, the messenger, what's your name? What's your purpose? Well, how can we honor you? And so he says, verse 18, but the messenger of Yahweh said to him, why do you ask my name? It is wonderful. Who is also called wonderful? Yeshua. So like I've said before, that these messengers, especially when they're called the angel of the Lord, a messenger of the Lord, is no other than a pre-Yeshua. He's the prince of the covenant. He's the messenger, the royal messenger directly sent from Yahweh to whoever he has a message for. So he's an image bearer of the King Yahweh, and he's the one that brings the message to the people. That's why he's called wonderful. And the only one that's called wonderful is Yahweh and Yeshua, which are the same God, except different roles. Okay. So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering, the mincha, and offered it on the rock to Yahweh. On the rock. Who's the rock? Yeshua. And he performed wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. In other words, while they're offering this, something's going on that this messenger is showing them the wonders of Yahweh. And it says, for it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, that the angel of Yahweh ascended in the flame of the altar. When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. Because now they see this individual who they've been entertaining as a prophet or as another human. All of a sudden he's dancing on the flames, and poof, he goes up with the offering. And they're like, they hit the floor immediately, because now they see that this is no regular messenger. This is a direct messenger from the Lord from the heavens. Verse 21, now the messenger of the Lord did not appear to Manoah or his wife again. Then Manoah knew that he was the messenger of Yahweh. So Manoah said to his wife, we will surely die, for we have seen God. But his wife said to him, of course, she's more wiser and has more understanding. She goes, "Oh, honey, if the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have let us hear things like this at this time." Then the woman gave birth to a son and named him, well, the translation is Samson, but the Hebrew is Shimshon. Shimshon, and it's not Chinese.
Sounds like a Ching Chong song, right?
Shimshon, which means little son, because it comes from the root shemesh. And shemesh in Hebrew is son. Shimshon. Of course, we're used to Samson. We say Shimshon, nobody knows who he is. But his name is Shimshon, which comes from the root shemesh, and shemesh is son. But by saying Shimshon, little son, because remember that what he's going to do is to deliver the people of Israel from the Philistines. So in other words, if he's in also a representation of Yahweh, and who is the son? We know who the son is. Son, S-U-N, and son, S-O-N. So chapter 14. Then the woman gave birth to a son and named him Samson, and the child grew up, and Yahweh blessed him. And the spirit of Yahweh began to stir him in Mahaneh Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So the Holy Spirit, here's Samson in this area, so between Zorah and Eshtaol is somewhere around here. But it's around this area. So from that moment on, as he grows, the Spirit of the Lord is already in him, stirring him up to do what he's supposed to do. So again, the Holy Spirit did not show up on Acts chapter 2. Holy Spirit has always been with those that the Lord has appointed for a purpose of his kingdom. And it says in chapter 14, then Samson went down. Every time the Bible says that a person goes down, it means that their status, their spiritual status lowers. Okay? So that's why you always go up to Jerusalem. You never go down to Jerusalem, no matter where you're at. You can be up here, you say going up to Jerusalem. You can be up here, you say going up to Jerusalem. You never go down to Jerusalem, ever. That's why all the people that do aliyah means going up. You always go up to the Lord. You always go up. Doesn't matter what position your GPS could be, you still go up to Jerusalem. So it said, then Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. So he came back and told his father and mother, I saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. Then his father and his mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of our relatives or among all our people that you go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? Remember that the tradition and the custom was that they would marry within their clans to keep the heritage. So here he is. No, he wants a Philistine. But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she looks good to me. But really in the Hebrew says, for in his eyes she looks right. Right in the terms of yashar. Straight, correct. Right, almost a little bit like righteous. But in his eyes. So when he says she looks good, it doesn't mean that she has a great body and all that stuff. That she's beautiful. It's just that he sees something in her that he sees in his eyes that she's the right one. And it says, however, verse 4, his father and mother did not know that it was Yahweh, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. Now at that time, the Philistines were ruling over Israel. Remember that they ruled Israel for 40 years. So that's 40 years of oppression, 40 years of treating them badly. So then Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came as far as the vineyards of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, so that he tore him as one tears a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. So here he's going down. He's going with his family, but at this point he's alone. And this young lion goes towards him, and he just grabs it and tears it apart. And so one of the things culturally is if during this time, wild animals were abundant. So it's not like, I mean, you go now and you don't see them, but during that time, this is a possibility for anybody at any time, but he's able to take that young lion and tear it apart and kill it. And the thing is that when people did those things, they were lion hunters, or they were able to kill wild beasts. They were given the name Master of Beasts. So in a way, he became the Master of Beasts. And it says he didn't tell his parents. So he went down and talked to the woman, and she looked good to Samson again. She looked right in his eyes. When he returned later to take her, the term to take a woman, is marriage. The way of saying that he married her. He turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the body of the lion. So if the lion is dead, it's been laying there for a while, and all of a sudden these bees decide to be inside the body of the dead lion and produce honey, and he comes and eats that honey, is it clean or unclean? Remember, he couldn't eat anything unclean.
Clean.
No, I think it's unclean. It's inside the dead body.
But the honey?
No, the honey, in a way, he's eating from a dead animal. So, and you're not supposed to touch, even though, I mean, I don't know how he did it, but either way, if he's going inside the body of the dead lion and taking the honey, it's possible that this was unclean. Okay? So it says in verse 9, so he scraped the honey into his hands and went on eating as he went. His merry way, kind of like Winnie the Pooh. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they ate it. They didn't even ask where he got it from. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey out of the body of the lion. So I'm assuming he didn't say it. Why? Because his mother was told nothing unclean. He can eat nothing unclean. So if he told her, he didn't tell them, most likely it was unclean, and he knew his mom was going to be all over him. Okay? I'm assuming. It doesn't say that anywhere. I haven't read that, but I'm assuming that it was unclean, and he just...
Maybe he was hungry and he acted like Esau. He didn't care.
Yeah, he didn't care. And then we're going to see, as we continue reading about Samson, he seems to have an I don't care attitude. Like, I'm anointed. I'm gifted. I've been chosen. And probably he's tired growing up under the shadow of his mom saying, Samson, don't drink that, don't touch that, don't eat that. And he's like, so don't you think now he's probably like, now I'll do whatever I want. I'm assuming. I mean, I would do that if it was me. But anyway.
Probably a young man, crazy.
Yeah, he's young, and he's, like most young people, young and stupid. So anyway. Then his father went down, verse 10, then his father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there, for the young man customarily did this. In other words, by the father going to where the woman that he liked is, and he doing a feast, this is the marriage ceremony. Okay? Because in other words, it indirectly tells you there's an exchange of the bridal price, of the dowry. All these things had to happen. They don't give you the details, but this is traditions and custom that they already understood this is what's going on. So he does a feast. And it says in verse 11, when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. In other words, 30 Philistines sat around him, probably just to keep an eye on him, watch him. Because remember, he's not a Philistine. He's out of he's not from the neighborhood. He's different. So probably they're They want to make sure that nothing happens, so they're all over this guy. Verse 12, then Samson said to them, let me now propound a riddle to you. If you will indeed tell it to me within the 7 days of the feast, again, 7 days of a feast is the wedding ceremony. It always lasts 7 days. So here he says, if you are able to tell me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothes. But if you are unable to tell me, then you shall give me 30 linen wraps and 30 changes of clothes. And they said to him, propound your riddle that we may hear it. So remember, by saying this, he says, if you don't answer me, then you give me 30 pieces of, and this is not just regular clothing, everyday clothing. He's talking about, if they're in a feast, he's talking about luxurious linen, very expensive linen, very expensive clothing. So he's not asking just for, give me your t-shirt and your jeans. He's asking for really expensive clothing that you would only use in feast. And if they are not able to tell him, all these 30 men that are around him, he says, then all you guys have to give me the best that you have. So they feel like, who's this guy who's going to take away our stuff? But he says, if you're able to tell me, then I will give you 30 pieces of clothing. So he says to them the riddle. It says, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. But they could not tell the riddle in 3 days. So they were like, what could it be? So they're trying to figure out. In 3 days, still nothing happens. Then it came about on the 4th day that they said to Samson's wife, remember, they're in the feast, 7-day feast. This is the 4th day. So they go to her. Entice your husband so that he will tell us the riddle, or we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us to impoverish us? In other words, if we're not able to tell him, he's going to take everything that we have. So you brought this guy, you married this guy to take away our wealth and take away what's ours. Imagine, to the point that they're threatening her that they will burn her and her family. All for a riddle. So they say in verse 16, Samson's wife wept before him and said, you only hate me, and you do not love me. You have propounded a riddle to the sons of my people and have not told it to me. Okay, no drama, sorry. And he said to her, behold, I have not told it to my father or mother, so should I tell you? However, she wept before him 7 days while their feast lasted. Can you imagine a woman every night crying and asking and nagging and, come on, this is their honeymoon, their wedding feast, and she's just there, complaining and please. Had he been Puerto Rican, trust me, it wouldn't have lasted 7 days. Anyway. And it says, and on the 7th day he told her because she pressed him so hard. She then told the riddle to the sons of her people. So the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. In other words, had you messed up with my woman, you wouldn't know what was going on. He calls her a heifer. He's so mad. Had you not messed up with that woman, that cow? And he said to them, then the Spirit, in verse 19, then the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of them, Philistines, and took their spoil and gave the changes of clothes to those who told the riddle. And his anger burned, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his friend. So what's going on? This is the wedding week. He's so mad because his wife told. So he goes to his father's house, which in a way, for the Israeli culture, it was a custom that you got married, had your 7 days of ceremony, and then many times the husband would go back to his father's house and the wife would stay with his parents until she was able to bear a son or bear a child. So what would happen is he would come once in a while and, the rest. So once she got pregnant, then she moved in with her husband. It wasn't until she was, that was some way the tradition, the custom. And usually they always expected a son because the son would carry on the name of the family and would be the leader of the family once the father had died. And so because maybe the Philistines didn't have this tradition, by him leaving, they thought, well, he really hated her. Remember she was saying, oh, you hate me because you don't tell me what's going on. And she was probably telling her dad, Dad, this guy won't tell me this. So the father-in-law thought that he really hated her. He left. So he gave her to another guy. Customs. Anyway, chapter 15. But after a while, in the time of wheat harvest, which is Shavuot, Samson visited his wife with a young goat and said, I will go into my wife in her room. But her father did not let him enter. Her father said, I really thought that you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please let her be yours instead. Samson then said to them, this time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. Samson went and caught 300 foxes. Now you have to understand that he was really upset and mad because they gave his wife to another man. He wasn't expecting that. He came even with a little goat. And he was planning to, have sexual relations with her. Because that was a tradition, the way they did it in Israel. But the Philistines thought, he hates her, let's give her away. And he said, I have a younger daughter, you can take her. Women were tossed here and there, Anyway. So he says, I will not be blamed for what I'm going to do because of what he done with his wife. And he says, even though it's 6 foxes, the most likely would be jackals because foxes usually run alone, and they weren't that common. And jackals usually go in groups, and it was easy for him to find 300 of them. So he took torches and turned the fox's tail to tail and put one torch in the middle between 2 tails. When he had set fire to the torches, he released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, thus burning up both the shocks and the standing grain along with the vineyards and groves. So what he took all these animals, he tied their tails together, put torches on the tails, set them on fire, and then let them loose. And of course, they're all running and they're all tied up, so they're running all through the fields, and they're burning everything. I mean, how he got that idea, I don't know. But the thing is, he burned down everything. Remember, it's the harvest. So that means that all that grain is ready to be harvested. And what does he do? He destroys all their food. So you think they're going to be mad with him? And it says, verse 5, when he had set fire to the torches, he released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, thus burning up all that stuff. Verse 6, then the Philistines said, who did this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took his wife and gave her to his companion. So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. So now the poor woman gets killed and her father because of what had happened. Verse 7, Samson said to them, since you act like this, I will surely take revenge on you. But after that, I will quit. He struck them ruthlessly with a great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock of Etam. So what did he do? He went back and killed all these guys. Why? Because they killed his wife, his father-in-law. And then he went and hid in a rock. I would hide too if I had all the nation of the Philistines after me. Verse 9. Then the Philistines went up and camped in Judah and spread out in Lehi. The men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? And they said, we have come up to bind Samson in order to do to him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." So Samson was a little revengeful, don't you think? He was a little, no mercy there. Verse 12, they said to him, "We have come down to bind you so that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not kill me." So they said to him, "No, but we will bind you fast and give you into their hands, yet surely we will not kill you." Then they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. So Judah, they come to Judah because where he's hiding, Judah's here. So he's hiding somewhere in the territory of Judah. So the Philistines come to Judah and say, "Give us Samson or we'll basically kill the whole tribe of Judah." And so they say, 3,000 men of Judah come to meet with Samson and convince him that he needs to give himself up, because if not, the whole tribe of Judah is going to be slaughtered by the Philistines. Because remember, the Philistines are the rulers of the land during this time. And so he says, "Just as long as you guys don't kill me, I'll go." So they tied him up with some ropes. And it says, verse 14, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted as they met him. In other words, shouting, I guess, from joy, "Yeah, we have him." And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, so he reached out and took it and killed 1,000 men with it. Now, another thing you have to consider is that a jawbone of a donkey is not really that big. So if you understand, this is a sarcastic way of saying, with such a little jawbone, this guy comes and kills 1,000 of them. In other words, shaming the Philistines. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men." When he had finished speaking, he threw the jawbone from his hand, and he named that place Ramat Lehi, which means hill of the jawbone. Then he became very thirsty, and he called to Yahweh and said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" But Elohim split the hollow place that is in Lehi, so that water came out of it. When he drank, his strength returned, and he revived. Therefore he named it En Hakkoreh, which is in Lehi to this day. So he judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. And that means the spring of the one who called. Again, when there's a lot of rescue and deliverance from the Lord, all these places get these names to honor him. And it sounds a little bit like things that Hagar went through, Rebecca went through. Remember, wells are very important, springs. Now, chapter 16, it says, "Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went into her. When it was told to the Gazites, saying, 'Samson has come here,' they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city." Now I'm going to, so the thing is that everybody's against Samson because everywhere he goes, he causes trouble, he kills people, he does a whole bunch of things, so they want to kill him. And it says, they found out that he was visiting a harlot. And so they're waiting for him outside the city. And they said to themselves, "Let us wait until the morning light, then we will kill him." Now Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the city gate and the 2 posts, and pulled them up along with the bars. Then he put them on his shoulders and carried them up to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. Now, these are not just little bitty doors. These are the doors of the city entrance. These are huge wooden doors. He takes them, breaks them out of the gate, takes them, puts them on his back, and goes with them. And wherever he went all the way opposite Hebron to a place where he put there the gates so that everybody could see. In other words, again, he's shaming the people. Just one guy. I wonder if they had spinach during that time. Anyway. Verse 4, after this it came about that he loved the woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Verse 5, the famous Delilah. The lords of the Philistines, remember there's 5 of them. The lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, entice him and see where his great strength lies, and how we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him. Now, one thing I was thinking when I was reading this is Samson most likely was not a bulky, hulky kind of guy. Because if they don't know where his strength comes from, okay, so he wasn't a guy, he wasn't like an Arnold Schwarzenegger. Of course, when Arnold was in his young, all muscle and huge, and he was going around with, he was probably like a normal looking guy. Because the strength came from the Holy Spirit in him. To show again that all glory and honor should go to the Father. It was not him. So if they're asking, where does he get all this strength from? It's probably this guy, he wasn't really huge. He wasn't big. Yet the strength that he had was because, first of all, him being separated as a Nazirite. And number 2, it was through the Holy Spirit. So they go to this Delilah because he really loved her. He was really in love with her. Again, he goes after all these Philistines. And they came to her and they said, remember, it's the lords of the Philistines, and these are 5 guys, 5 princes, kings. Then they said, then we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So she would be getting 5,500 pieces of silver, which according to the calculations of the commentary, that was almost, I think, yeah, here she would have been a millionaire. But during that time, the money that they would give her silver, each king, 1,100 pieces, 5 of them, she had the wages of 500 years. Can you imagine during that time, did she say, oh yeah, just wait and see. Wait for me, I'll let you know. So it says, verse 6, so Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength is and how you may be bound to afflict you. And Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh cords that have not been dried, then I will become weak and be like any other man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh cords that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in wait in an inner room. She's got these guys waiting there for, and then she says, verse 9, now she had men lying in wait in an inner room, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson! But he snapped the cords as a string of tow snaps when it touches fire, so his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have deceived me and told me lies. Now please tell me how you may be bound. I mean, come on. This happens how many times? And she's asking him, and he gives her, he's playing around with her. He's just, like teasing her.
He knows what she
But then she goes, every time she does what he says, Samson, the Philistines! And she's waiting just to see, And the guys come, they're in the other room. They're coming to wait, and here comes Samson. Bah! And breaks everything. And so she keeps on doing that over and over and over again with ropes, putting them this way, putting them that way. And so in verse 13, it says, then Delilah said to Samson, up to now you have deceived me and told me lies. Tell me how you may be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my hair with the web and fasten it with a pin, then I will become weak and be like any other man. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his hair and wove them into the web, and she fastened it with a pin and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson! But he awoke from his sleep and pulled out the pin of the loom and the web. Then she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength is. It came about when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death. I mean, can you imagine a woman nagging over every day? Where's your strength? Just please tell me you don't love me, blah, 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 blah. To the point that he's dying. I was, oh, sorry. You can't hate women. And so what happens? Verse 17, so he told her all that was in his heart and said to her, a razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and be like any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. So now she knows for sure because of the way he told her. Verse 19, she made him sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his hair. So here Samson has 7 locks of hair. I'm assuming it's long. He's never been shaved. I mean, he's never had his hair cut. Why 7? And why his hair? We'll talk about that later. Think about that. And it says, verse 20. For to him shave off the 7 locks of his hair, then she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. In other words, they cut the hair and just, maybe pinching him or something, or just to see, and he doesn't feel, he's starting to, I know now his strength has gone. So verse 20, she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that Yahweh had departed from him. So I think up to this point, he was too confident in himself that, nothing could happen to him because he was already a Nazarite and nothing could happen to him. So he thought that maybe by shaving his head, that wasn't the big deal, Maybe he didn't know that the strength was part of it was. It's not that the strength is his hair, but what the hair and the 7 locks meant. That's where the strength was. It wasn't so much that it was the hair, but what it signified, what they meant. So it says, verse 21, and of course the Holy Spirit is not there because he broke the covenant that his mother made of allowing him to be a Nazarite since from the womb. And it says, the Philistines, verse 21, then the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes. That was a custom, a tradition during that time to do that to your enemies. Remember, he's considered an enemy. And they would take out their eyes. Why? Because they couldn't see and therefore couldn't get up to fight. And they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after it was shaved off. Now the lords of the Philistines assembled to offer great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, for they said, so Dagon or Dagon, whatever was their god. And Dagon, even though sometimes they referred to him as the fish god, he was really related to agriculture, to grain, to food. And they said, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And in the Hebrew, they call him Eloheinu, because Elohim is God. Okay? Of course, not our God, but they use the same term, Dagon Eloheinu. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, and this is something that I want to share with you. Praise in Hebrew is the word Hillel, and it's spelled with a hey and 2 lamets. Okay, so that means praise. And it says, so our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us. But the word for slain, they call him a destroyer, which they translate it as destroyer, but really it's something that devastates because it dries up. It takes away, it takes out the life. So they translate as destroyer, but really in the Hebrew, what it means is something that's dried up, that has no more life in it. So that's what Samson did to them. And so they said, who has slain many of us. So they're praising their God. They're giving Hallel to their God. And they're praising him because the one that had slain many of them had been, was now being, was captured. But the word for slain is halal. Was a chet. It means slain. So the only difference between halal and halal is one is a chet and one is a hay. With a hay, it means praise. With a chet, it means slain, to be killed. And all the difference between the hay and the chet, this is the hay, and this is the chet. The only difference between those two letters is this. The hay has an opening and the chet not. So that's why you have to, when you're reading Hebrew, even though sometimes the translations, but just that little difference is the difference between praising and between slaying, killing. That's why Hamas in Hebrew is violence. How appropriate.
Yes.
Hamas is, again, was a chet. So it says, so they're happy, they're feasting, and so it says in verse 25, it so happened when they were in high spirits, feasting, they said, call for Samson that he may amuse us. Now the word amuse there is yitzhak. Yitzhak, like Isaac. So they're to bring him out so we can laugh. We can have a fun time in his name. He can entertain us. So they called for Samson from the prison and he entertained them. It wasn't that he entertained them, just being there without his eyes, not being able to walk. Because remember, he has a little boy that's holding his hand to lead him. So just by seeing him without his eyes and all, probably dirty and probably even naked, that to them was a joke. Remember, like they used to do with the Christians and that they would throw them to the lions, and that for them was a joke. Like now, bombing people, that to them is a joke. So it says, so they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them, and they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests. The house is the temple. Remember, they're celebrating and feasting and offering sacrifices to Dagon or Dagon, their god. So they're in the temple of Dagon. And it says, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And about 30,000 men and women were on the roof looking on while Samson was amusing them. What they translate as roof is most likely balconies. Remember that the temple of Herod had balconies and had rooms, upper rooms, and around the temple, where the temple was. So this temple also has balconies. So the people, probably the one that had the most money, are up there and they're watching down and looking at Samson, laughing, mocking him. And so there's like 3,000 people up in the balconies. And he says, then 28, then Samson called to Yahweh and said, O Adonai Elohim, please remember me and please strengthen me just this time, Adonai, that I may at once be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested and braced himself against them. The one was his right hand and the other was his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bent with all his might so that the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed in his life. Then his brothers and all his father's household came down, took him, brought him up, and brought him up. Remember, going up. Brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he judged Israel 20 years. So that remember that while he's in prison, his hair starts growing. And he makes this last plea to the Father. Please just give me strength one more time that I may avenge what they've done to me. And so with that avenge, he's in the temple of this foreign god. And with his strength again, he pulls down on the pillars and the whole thing just comes tumbling down.